Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS. Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use VRS.
Well, hello and good evening, everybody. Welcome back to Apex Racing TV, and welcome back to the Evolution Sim Racing GT3 Championship. This is round number 4 of the season, coming to you tonight from Interlagos. My name is Ron Mullins. Alongside me in the commentary booth is Aaron Smith, and in the virtual production hall we have Joshua Wilkie. Tonight we have another duo of 30-minute long races to tackle at a track with a whole lot of flow and elevation change. And now, Aaron, there's really no doubt that the drivers on the racetrack tonight are going to have some fun, but at a racetrack like this, do you expect there to be some good racing tonight, or do you think passing is going to be a rare commodity?
Well, anyone who's familiar with Interlagos should know how absolutely amazing this track is for racing, hot lapping, whatever you fancy around here. It's got it, it's brilliant. I genuinely cannot remember a bad race that I've seen, not just in real life, but in sim racing around here. It's just always great, and it's unexplainable. I don't know any other track that's like it, because some tracks are usually pretty good for racing, got the likes of Spa, Monza, but sometimes they do have stinkers. This track, for some reason, never does. It's just always been immune. It's always a great track that's both challenging, punishable if you mess up even slightly, but if you get it right, it's satisfying, it's amazing to hot lap, and the racing is always good no matter what cars you're in. And finally this season, we're at a track I like. It's a shock to the system. Le Mans was okay, but this is my favourite so far. Oh my god.
Oh boy, that may be a factor that we see later on. Don't have to worry about the pit stops, but we're going to have to worry about that pit barrier. That was a very terrifying moment for Danny Lee in the 271 car. He was pretty impressive last time out at Circuit de Barcelona, Catalunya, looking to try and continue those impressive runs and hopefully going to avoid any close encounters with that pit wall in the races that we have coming up for you today here on Apex Racing TV. It's been a fantastically entertaining season thus far. We've had 4 races thus far. One one-hour long race at Le Mans, 2 30 minutes at Indy, followed by another 1 hour long race at Barcelona just 1 week ago. And in terms of the championship point situations, it's pretty interesting in all of the classes. There's been up and down fights in the elite category. The GT3 cars have been putting on pretty good shows in all 3 of the classes that we have here, but in elite, it's been pretty tight between the 2 RDSA esports teammates. Tristan Denabrega in that McLaren has been an absolute wheelman thus far. He's currently at the front of the running board, currently has 2 wins already, 263 points on the board, only 3 in front of his teammate Luke Lucchesi in second, Jean Brainback in that Porsche a little bit farther behind in P3. The elite standings have been pretty close, though, only 3 points between the 2 teammates at the front. Luke Lucchesi already has 2 championship wins, back-to-back championship wins here in the Evolution Sim Racing GT3 Championship. Trying to go for 3 this season, however, he's got a whole lot of a fight on his hands with his teammate running in a different car. Lucchesi running in a Porsche, Denabrego running in a McLaren. So that's how it looks in Elite GT3. Moving on to the Premier category, meanwhile, been very up and down thus far. Nick Stube currently at the front of the standings there. Despite the fact he's yet to score a victory thus far, the driver of that Glass Tech Racing McLaren has been pretty fast, currently 313 points on the board as it stands, only 4 races in. Matt Hoyland in the BMW, meanwhile, he is only 2 points back in second, only 2 points separating the front drivers there. A little bit spread out behind with Matthew Jones at 178 points in the 3rd position as it stands currently. But moving on to the Evo category, been a little bit topsy-turvy, but I gotta say Ashley Brooks has been incredibly dominant so far this season. He has 3 victories on the board as it stands at the moment. However, had a pretty rough show last time out at Circuit de Barcelona Catalunya, allowing Gareth Noon in that Lamborghini to snag his first victory of the season. So Ashley Brooks may be starting to crumble under some pressure, but looking like that Evo standings, Evo championship is pretty set in stone. But the elite standings and the elite and the premier categories, Aaron, with only 3 and 2 points separating the drivers at the front of the championship respectively in both of those classes. Got some brilliant championship fights to look at.
Yeah, we definitely do. I think the fight between Denabrega and Lucchesi throughout this whole season is going to definitely be one to watch. I think Lucchesi's probably going to have the upper hand in terms of consistency and delivering on a week-to-week basis. But Denabrega so far this season has just ever so slightly looked like the quicker all-round driver. So that's going to be really, really interesting to watch as we head over the next few rounds. The Premier and the Evo class is a bit more tricky to say on who is going to come out on top with that one. And of course, we need to remember the cars change pretty much every single week in terms of how good they are. The McLaren definitely seems to be one of the top choices so far this season. The Porsche as well has looked very, very strong. And then I'd probably say the Ferrari has looked the 3rd quickest. I think all the other cars behind have just fallen off a little bit. The Corvette, the McLaren, the BMW, they've all just been lagging behind a little bit. And something else I noticed is no one's in the Ford. That no one has taken to the Ford GT3 at all this season, not from what I've seen. So clearly that car not winning over anyone so far.
I mean, there's always been a joke in the car community about Mustang drivers hitting second gear and immediately spinning off. I don't know if anyone watching this stream on Apex Racing TV or if you've seen videos like that, Aaron, but one of the most famous videos of drivers in Mustangs hitting second gear after trying to do a smoky burnout out there on the roads was actually just spinning off the track and probably either hitting a tree, a light pole, or some people standing right by the road. One of the most famous videos of a Mustang driver doing that was filmed like a mile away from where I live. So the Mustang not having the best reputation in the world of iRacing or real life for that matter for being a good handler. I mean, it's a muscle car, should be expected. It's going to have the muscles down the straightaways, but come time for the corners, you're going to have to muscle that thing around. But that Mustang proving to be a little bit unpopular, very odd to say. And everything I've heard about that Mustang, Aaron, it has been described as a little bit of a woolly handler. But even with that being said, I have seen some drivers in some other series broadcasted here on Apex Racing TV be able to wheel that Mustang around. I guess it is somewhat understandable the driver's not really picking the Mustang, but I don't know, maybe I'm just a little bit biased and I want to see one of those Fords out there.
Well, I can definitely understand that from your perspective, but for me, I'm very much 50-50 on the Mustang. I mean, I think it is more best used in other series, and not really a GT3 championship. I think people just miss the old Ford GT, to be honest. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was a meme every single season. It was probably one of the slowest cars, but it was just fun. It was just old school. It was just one of the I think one of the oldest cars in iRacing, and the older you go in the iRacing catalog, you can tell how far we've come, definitely over the past like decade or so. And it just gave that old school iRacing feel where it's nigh on undrivable, but in a fun way. A lot like the Radical SR8 in that sense. And I think that's why a lot of people miss the 12C as well. It was similar in some ways, but actually had some competitiveness to it, at least sometimes. But yeah, the Ford Mustang, not really something that comes to mind as a GT3. I think it's done a bit poorly in real life as well, so I guess you could say it's comparable to the Sim and it's realistic in that way. But literally, I think every single other GT3 is in this field. We've got, I think, only one Audi, a couple Mercs, a few Lamborghinis like we've seen, but just no Fords. So I would have thought at least one person would have gone for it, but like we've said, it's clearly too much of a handful.
And going back to a point you did mention a couple of moments ago there, Aaron, about some cars that can be woolly handlers being ones that kind of are a little bit lovable in that sort of way, kind of like the Skip Barber in iRacing. That's part of the reason why I very much prefer driving 1930s Formula One cars in the world of sim racing. That'd be an interesting car to see added into the iRacing platform, like an old 30s Alfa Romeo Formula One car, or an old 1930s Indy cars back when they were pretty much all just barn finds that someone slapped a motor into and went about 100 miles an hour around Indianapolis. But anyways, we're in the midst of this qualifying session before we get too deep into the history of motorsports, which, trust me folks, me and Aaron can yap your ears off about. Let's talk about this qualifying session. Some drivers already on their first laps. Here's Malcolm Coates, the American, in the Rage Against the Game Esports 121 Corvette. He's heading his way down that start-finish not so straight straightaway now, off through turn number 14 and 15 to bring this lap to a close. I just noticed something. I'm not sure if this is an error on my end, but he's currently scored in first, but it has the RD next to him instead of the ST. There we go. So, running in forward at the moment, I guess would probably be the correct term. So it goes back to that damn Mustang.
Oh, I mean, you just wonder how much slower that thing would have been round here. And, well, an agile circuit like this, I can't imagine it would have done very well at all, to be honest. But these Porsches and these McLarens, cars that are kind of more honed in and actually look like they can corner, very much going a lot better than some of the other cars. Admittedly, Lee seems to be getting the absolute most out of that Mercedes. He did it last week at Catalonia, like we saw. He finished an amazing P2 in the end and could have won had his race gone just a slight bit better. So compared to everyone else in the Merc, he is just blitzing everyone else right now. And it's a difficult car to drive. That definitely requires some finesse, a certain amount of driving style as well, setup knowledge as well, probably on Lee's side. But the other cars, like the McLaren and the Porsche, just seem to be an absolute dream to drive, at least for this season. As Rob McKee coming through the tight and twisty middle parts of Interlagos, as we head into turn 10 up at the top of the track pretty much. And I really do love the middle part of this lap. It's not too high speed. It just requires a certain level of finesse. This last corner, probably the most difficult corner on the entire track to get right, as Rob McKee just getting a touch of understeer and oversteer at the same time through that last corner. And then it's flat out all the way to the line. Even in these GT3 cars, this is easy flat all the way through here. And turn 1, as we all know, we've all done it. It's also one of the more difficult corners on this track. Very easy to lock up into here. You just have to get the braking right. You want to use all of the curbs on the inside and then fall towards the outside of turn 3. And this long straight, probably one of the best overtaking opportunities on the track. We've seen many times in sim racing and in real life, people sending it down at turn 4 into the Cedar de Lago. It's very tricky, as you can see. Rob just getting a tiny bit deep into there. That's probably going to be an off track for him. And then coming towards turn 6, it's very, very long right-hander. Feels like it's going on forever. No braking markers into turn 8. You just have to guess pretty much on driver feel. And now we're pretty much back at the same point that we left him off on the lap before. And he seems to be going okay in the Evo class, but just needs a little bit of touching up here and there in his lap. And he should probably get into the top 5.
Well, he's currently inside the top 5 in the points standings coming into this race, and inside the top 5 as it stands currently in the Evo category. Ashley Brooks in that McLaren looking to try and continue that dominance. Ashley Brooks has been incredibly impressive to follow thus far this season. Had a little bit of a doozy of a race last time out at Catalunya. I don't believe he actually set a qualifying time and possibly even ran into some connection issues, I believe, during the race, and even got involved in an incident at the very beginning. But Brooks had a pretty rough round and rough go of things last time out at Barcelona, but looking to try and turn things around. A small little hiccup, a small little speed bump to run over throughout this season. And bearing in mind, we're only 4 races into this season, 4 rounds into it at the conclusion of tonight's action, but we still got a whole lot of this season left to go. Got tracks like Montreal, Red Bull Ring, Watkins Glen, Fuji Sebring, and Laguna Seca to bring this season to a close that stretches from now all the way through until the end of November. So despite the fact that Brooks ran into some difficulties last time out, I think he still has a whole lot of time to try and turn this around and make sure that's just a one-off. Looking to try and do that today as he's currently on provisional pole in Evo.
Yeah, I think Catalonia was very much a blip for Ashley Brooks. He's looked very, very good in the opening few rounds of this season and currently resides in pole in that Evo class. He's only a second off Dana Brega's time. And that's usually what you expect around Interlagos. It's usually fairly close gaps between everyone. And yeah, all the way down to 22nd place, a second between the field. Very, very close today, which, you know, goes well for when we do eventually get into the racing later on in about 7 minutes' time. Of course, we've got 30 minutes today instead of the usual 1 hour, so no pit stops to worry about unless anyone has a cheeky smash into the wall or another car. Just a straight sprint all the way until the end. And like we saw at Indy, it's very, very chaotic, especially in that second race, where the first race people are kind of just finding each other out, seeing where everyone is in terms of pace, seeing how aggressive everyone's going to be, seeing where the best overtaking opportunities are. And then that second race is just a complete free-for-all. And that's exactly what we saw at Indy. The first race was very tame, went very, very swimmingly, and then the second race was just utter chaos. And I think the top 10 being reversed, I believe, in that second race is, yeah, that definitely made things a little bit more spicy at Indy. And you saw some pretty top drivers. I think Dana Brega was involved in an incident, a couple others as well. And I'm probably expecting something similar today.
Yeah, Tristan Dana Brega had a really tough go of things in that second race. After grabbing the victory in the first, I believe he still ended up, I think he ended up with a top 10 when everything was said and done. 8th. Meanwhile, his teammate Luke Lucchesi, on the other hand, was pretty fast all throughout that. I believe sneaked away with 2 podiums. Part of the reason why he was leading the championship entering the last round of the season at Barcelona, Catalunya. But those drivers incredibly fast in that RDSA esports team. And you mentioned a good point there, Aaron, about that top 12 invert that we have for that second race. That just throws it throws a huge wrench into the works. These drivers in the first race as well, they're going to try and start the battle for that top 12 position, and we saw that a little bit as well at Indy for the last time we had the 2 30-minute race format, and that's pretty important as well because you've also got some interclass mingling there as well. You can occasionally have an elite driver battling with a premier, battling with an Evo driver. There's just a whole lot of stuff that can go on with that top 12 invert. You'd usually expect more of a top 10 invert, but I'm a fan of the top 12 just because it kind of throws in that added strange element of having drivers from different classes try and battle, scrape, and claw with each other to try and grab a P12 result, which may not seem like too much. In terms of the points, it's not a whole lot of points gained, but it sets you up beautifully for that second race, especially at a track like Indy, where you got a few overtaking opportunities. Same can be kind of said about here.
Yeah, see, the trouble when you have the inverse in whatever racing series you're doing, you want to make it so it's just about enough that it makes things interesting, but you don't want to basically punish whoever won the previous race for winning. Hence why if you kind of go more than about a third or a quarter of the field, it starts to get a bit mental. So you'll have grids of 20 or 30 drivers, and you'll just get a complete reverse grid from there. And it's basically like, well, why did I want to win then? You've gone from first all the way to 30th. So I think having a top 12 invert just about gives the drivers who did win enough of a chance to get back into the race and possibly fight for a podium, or if they're quick enough, get up to that winning spot once again. But it also gives drivers who, like you said, are in other classes or maybe had a bit of a poor first race, it gives them another chance just to try and get things back underway, maybe try and get a shock result. Who knows? We might see a Premier or even an Evo driver win an out-and-out race sometime this season because of that top 12 the top 12 invert. And if that does happen, wow, it's going to be some spectacle, I can assure you.
That it certainly would. This season there's been no shortage of those very odd moments, and Indy brought out a whole lot of them, especially at the beginning of that second race with some inverts. I know, Aaron, you kicked your PC accidentally and ended up having your PC kind of momentarily pass out on you, resulting in me having to cover the entire 51 car starting grid that we had for that race. But that second race at Indy was fantastically entertaining, and that track like that where, Aaron, you weren't really too big of a fan of it, it kind of created a bit more spice heading into that, so it gives us a whole lot to look forward to, especially considering the fact that this 30-minute race format is really the one that we're exclusively going to have throughout the rest of the season. We've only got 2 more 1-hour races to go throughout this season. Next one going to be next week at Montreal, and then the race at Fuji on November the 14th, going to be the 4th and final one that we have this season. So that 30-minute race format that we have today, going to be the premier sort of way to try and go about these races. So drivers slowly going to come to grips with that. I gotta say, one good thing about a series like this, as much as we have different classes to look at, there's also a pretty good dynamic of the fact that there's only GT3 cars running here. Full transparency, folks, I do the race control, race stewarding, and all that stuff for another series that's broadcasted here on Apex Racing TV. I will not say the name of that series because I am technically a company of that series, and I do not want to yap about this sort of issue that I have publicly without saying what the name of the series is. But it's a series that's broadcasted here on Apex Racing TV, and usually for the second races, they have an invert of the 2 classes that they have. They have LMP3s and GT4s. But the inverts can't be done by iRacing because they would just do the overall top 10 or whatever it may be. So us in race control, we have to sort the grid out manually, and having done that all by my lonesome about a month and a half ago, I can assure you folks that unless iRacing is doing it, never ever 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 have an invert, because the race control, unless you're going to be paying them a lot and probably paying for their therapy bills as well, that's not ideal in the slightest. But thankfully for this series, we don't have to worry about race control having to kind of worry about that and getting the field sorted out. iRacing going to work its magic and do that without any sort of blink of an eye, and that's going to play a big factor in this race. Some more cars out there on the racetrack currently. With only 30 seconds left to go, Luke Lucchesi looking to try and grab the pole in the elite category at 132.485. Then it's Stube currently at the front in Premier. That's a pretty good lap time from him, but very close between those 3 drivers at the front of the Premier category, separated by less than a tenth of a second. I have a feeling that Premier fight is probably going to be the one we keep our eyes on. What in the hell?
I don't know what Bradenback was doing there.
Yeah, I hide and seek from John Bradenback.
I don't quite know how he did that actually, but I mean, that's skill required. But yeah, fair play to Bradenback.
Yeah, fair play to him. I mean, hey, if it works, it works. I've seen some series in the past where some drivers get up to some shenanigans at the end of these qualifying sessions. Speaking of, that qualifying session is over, and we got the starting grid for you right now. Luke Lucchesi, the RDSA Esports 224 car, going to be starting this race from the pole. His teammate Tristan Denabrega, both of those drivers involved in the championship fight. They are going to be locking out the front row. Daniel Lee, off the back of an incredibly impressive performance in that Mercedes 1 week ago at Barcelona, going to be starting in third. Ryan Odens in fourth. Stefano Gattuso going to be starting in P5 in the Ferrari. Nick Stube going to be the driver premier category pole sitter, starting in P6 overall. Tom Weston going to be starting in 7th. Dean Powell going to round out your top 8. Joe Glass going to be starting in 9th. Darren Sharples in P10. Luke King going to be starting in 11th. Matt Hoyland going to be starting in P12. John Brainback, after those hide-and-seek shenanigans, going to be starting at P13. Ryan Woolsey in 14th. De Vries going to be starting in P15. Joe Sparra, my apologies, going to be starting in P16. And looking through the rest of the drivers we have starting in the top 26, going to be Ruben Behrings in 17th, Robin Aston in P18, Thomas Pugh in 19th, John McLuhan rounding at your top 20. Barrett Behrings, who already has a victory thus far this season in the Premier category, will be starting this race in 21st. Chris Jennings in 22nd, Alex Fretwell in 23rd. Ashley Brooks going to be starting in 24th, and rounding out your top 26 is going to be Malcolm Coates and Corey Maxim.
And then your rest of the grid is follows. Got a slightly smaller grid today, but still action-packed nonetheless. Robin Knoll in 27th place, Victor Van Ziest in 28th, Jeffrey Darman 29th, Stephen Donnelly in 30th place, Peter Black in 31st, Brayton Back in 32nd place. 33rd is going to be Josh. Thank you. Francois Brandon is in 33rd place. John Ludbrook is in 34th. Rold Turfcrewer is in 35th. Rob McKee 36th. Jonathan Provost in 37th. Bostock 38th. Jones in 39th. Keslow in 40th place. 41st is Horworth. 42nd Newton. 43rd Keenan. 44th is Dennis Kohler. 45th is Sean Clark. 46th is Van der Meer. 47th is James Pallow. 48th is Martin Koch, and 49th is Danny Weir, all the way at the back, and the only driver not to set a time.
49 cars that we have about to start this race in a couple of moments' time around a racetrack where, despite having a whole lot of runoff area, there is really no room to run or hide. We've got two 30-minute races which are set to be packed. A top 12 invert to talk about heading into race 2 around this 2.68 mile 15-turn road course, and it's going to be a fantastic day of racing action for round number 4 of the Evolution Sim Racing GT3 Championship. Riding on board with the pole man, the driver of that Porsche, that is the man who is the reigning 2-time champion of Luke Lucchesi. He's had a pretty strong start to this season, involved in a championship fight with his teammates. Will he be able to grab championship number 3? He may not be able to win it today, but he certainly will be able to lose it. The green flag is out in sim, but these drivers have to wait until they hit that start-finish line to gun it. The green flag is back out for those drivers, and the drivers are on their way. Heading down into turn number 1, looks like a pretty even keel start for both of the RDSA esports drivers. Heading down into turn number 1 and 2 through the Santa S's for the first time. Luke Lucchesi got to be able to get in front of his teammate Trishan Denabrega, who's definitely giving his teammate a little bit of a challenge at the beginning of that race. Some nerves if you're the team of RDSA esports. Don't want your two drivers involved in that championship fight to come to blows. Looking at some drivers battling a little bit farther in the back, heading down the back straightaway into turn number 4 for the first time. Most of the field making through the first lap clean with some off-track excursions for the BMW.
Very, very clean start for our 49 car grid so far anyway. No incidents at all, I don't think, up and down the grid, which is definitely what you want to see. And it just looks like it's been a really even start for most people. Not really any outliers at the moment, apart from Stephen Donnelly, who's gained 5 places. Well, now down to 4. I think he lost a place there to Brett Behrings. There, as Daniel Lee is currently ever so slightly under pressure. Up at the top for 4th place, he's got Stefan Gattuso behind him. Ferrari thought about going for a move, but just not there at all. Into turn 10, and now down into turn 12 in Junkao. Oh, there's a big off. That's a huge one. Who was that? That was Corey Maxim. And I don't know how hard he went into the wall, but that looked like a very high-speed incident, and he has towed back to the pits. That looks like big suspension damage for him. Don't think we're going to be seeing him for the most part of this race. But of course, he has another chance, that second 30-minute race, to try and get things back on track, as that's a BMW going up the inside of Matt Hoyland. No, sorry, that's Matt Hoyland going up the inside of, I believe that's Darren Sharples. And there's a big wreck behind that. Looks like about 5 cars.
Oh, that is a pile-up, and the rest of the field is having to negotiate that chaos, heading off into turn number 1, heading through the center as some drivers can go to blows, and with a lack of asphalt runoff area, this getting a little bit old in iRacing. Occasionally can have some moments like that happen. Have had only 2 major incidents thus far, and they have been major, folks. That pile-up heading through turn number 1, and that off-track moment involving Corby Maxim heading through turn number 11 into Jungsao of turn 12. That's a big hit for him. He's gone off the circuit and has had to tow. That's a big moment for a McLaren. Looking at a big fight involving a McLaren. Here's Shushin Denenbrega, the 270 RDSA esports car, running in second right behind his teammates. These drivers, they've been very respectful of each other. They've been very grateful with each other's presence at that team. However, when you got 2 drivers of the same team involved in a championship fight, you got to have something that's going to break eventually. My mind harkens back to really the biggest rivalry when I first got into Formula 1 with Lewis Hamilton and Nico Rosberg when they were partnered up at Mercedes. There's a very good reason why they hired Valtteri Bottas after that, mainly because Toto Wolff wanted no parts of 2 apex predators in their game going side by side and battling hard, but we got 2 drivers like that in this series. Denenbrega going for a send heading down into turn number 1. Maximum velocity in that McLaren heading down into that corner, was not able to get that move done. It was a dive for sure, and giving Lucchesi a little bit of a scare, but look at Odin's right behind. He will be there to pick up the pieces if those 2 teammates come to blows.
Well, if anyone is going to know how Denenbrega races, it's going to be his teammate Lucchesi. As well, he just knew what Denenbrega was going to do, broke super early to make sure he got the cut back on his teammate and took the lead once again. This is Brett Behrings trying to go around the outside of one of the Lamborghinis. That's a very, very clean move, and Behrings pretty much has got this one done, as the inside line for turn 6 is so powerful. And there you go, up into 5th place he goes. But to be fair, the Lamborghini on the outside of Stefan Donnelly is holding his own very, very nicely, but eventually just has to settle back into 6th place, and eventually Behrings gets that 5th top 5 spot confirmed for him at the moment. But here we go, we can get some replays of what on earth happened on those opening few laps. And here is Daniel Lee. I think this is when he started fighting with Otins as he goes off the track. Remember, that's Gattuso on his inside, and they just about got away with that one. As here's Joe Sparza as well, another driver that seems to have had an off, as this is a very common occurrence on lap 1 here at Interlagos. That off track is so punishing, ever so slightly wide. And, well, speaking of Joe Sparza, I think he's had a bit of an off on our live screens. I'm not quite sure what's happened to him there. I think he's gotten himself involved in a few other cars. Here is Alex Fretwell, probably doing the same thing down into turn 4. But here we go then. This is what happened to Corey Maxim. And, that was just awkward between those 2. And that was a heavy hit into that side.
Yeah, that was a big hit for Maximum. That, I believe, was Alex Fretwell that was on his outside in that Lamborghini. But either way, Corey Maxim going to be worse for wear as a result of that side-by-side. That was some bold stuff, with Rob McKee getting a move put on him by Peter Black in the Flat Cap Racing 209 Ferrari. That was incredibly close heading off into turn number 6. These drivers still battling. They're trying to find any sort of way in the book to get past each other. Usually we see these 1-hour races be hectic, let alone 30 minutes. These drivers feeling a lot more pressure than they usually do and trying to find any sort of way to wheel past each other. That was a fight involving Malcolm Coates coming out of turn number 10 just a couple of moments ago. Looking at a fight involving Ruben Behrings, a driver of the 251 car, who has a victory thus far this season. That coming back in Indianapolis 2 weeks ago in the 2nd race there. So if his performance last time out in the last 2 30-minute race round that we had, we may see him in victory lane. But these drivers battling for the victory in race 1. Odin's looking to try and pounce on Denenbrega and Lucchesi as those 2 drivers are still battling. Wrapping up the point I mentioned earlier, Aaron, in the world of Formula 1, we have seen teammates come to blows and just turn out to hate each other. We may be seeing that with with this RDSA esports team because you got two drivers both on their A game in this series, involved in a championship fight and really in a class of their own most of the time. They are trading blows, occasionally trade paint, but they are going to be hoping that they don't end up in some sort of barrier. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot more tension within that team.
Oh, there'll be a hell of a lot of tension, I can imagine, within those two drivers. Lucchesi, of course, trying to defend his championship, and Dennebrega trying to get his first. And they're both very, very rapid drivers, and 100% are... It's kind of like Lewis and Max in 2021, isn't it? They both just pushing themselves to the absolute limit, and even if they do come together, they both kind of deserve the championship. They've both been brilliant so far this season, and I don't think today is going to be any different. And let's not forget Ryan Otins, who in our first 30-minute race of the season, he nearly won that second Indy race. His teammate, King, who's currently down in 7th, nearly promoted him onto that winning spot. But here we go. Is Dennebrega going to try and go for another move? Round the outside into turn 1. It looks like he's got a bit deep again, but he manages to keep it on this time. And that's the first time we've seen Dennebrega take the lead successfully in this race. But Lucchesi is not going to go down without a fight. And yes, look at Ryan Otins. He is eyeing this one up as well. He looks super, super quick in the opening stages of this race, but chooses to play the patient game. And Lucchesi losing out to his teammate. And will Dennebrega now have the opportunity to romp away with it? Is there anything these guys can do to try and fight back, as Dennebrega looks absolutely rapid at the moment, and he looks to be pulling away ever so slightly every single corner. It's already up to 0.7 of a second nearly.
Yeah, that McLaren is looking absolutely rapid, maybe being held up a little bit by his teammate of Luke Lucchesi in the early stages. He's going to look to try and pull away, and this would be a statement victory for Tristan Dennebrega as well. His third victory on the season if he was able to seal the deal, and that would be a good victory for him. Got to take a look maybe to try and figure out what happened. Heading down into turn number 1. Yeah, you can see, and that was basically about 4 or 5 incidents in the span of just about 5 seconds when they all sparked off. Joe Sparra nearly, while he rejoined the circuit, I believe the Audi, that was one of the first to arrive on the scene, spinning out of protest to avoid the stopped car of Sparra on the outside line off into turn number 1. You can see that Porsche spinning off, Sparra spinning around, some drivers coming to blows right in front of him, some drivers running into the side of Sparra, and you can see it was a driver not even spinning as a result of that Sparra incident. It was just a driver going off for a bonsai move off into turn number 1 and spinning around like a top as a result. Just a whole lot of chaos heading off into turn number 1 at the very beginning of this race. But gonna take a look at another angle of this drama that we've had thus far, Aaron. This was just probably about 18 incidents and 18 different drivers feeling a little bit too brave off into turn 1.
Yeah, and that's what you're going to get in the opening stages of a race. Drivers just feeling a little bit too overconfident. And yeah, that just resulted in a huge, huge pile-up. And I don't think it resulted in massive damage for anyone. I think most of them have managed to continue. But of course, just losing time, losing precious seconds on the racetrack, definitely not what you'd want. As this is Ruben Behrens going past one of the Porsches. That looked like a fairly simple overtake there for Ruben Behrens. That was Victor Van Zies who he just got past. And now Ruben Behrens is up to 18th, making steady progress. And honestly, Ruben Behrens probably will want to get that coveted 12th spot to get himself back into this race proper. And that next race in about 40 minutes time, it could be one to remember for Ruben Behrens. He has looked pretty good so far this season. Of course, he, I believe, was the driver who did end up winning that second race at Indy. And well, this race so far at least has not gone to plan for him at the moment, but if he can make his way back up to 12th, bit of a task, having lost so much time during that incident on that second lap, but not too many places in front of him. Currently holding that 12th place spot is Thomas Pugh, and the only other driver in that top 12 who isn't in the elite class is currently Matt Hoyland, sitting in 8th place, and he's going very, very well in that BMW. The next closest Premier driver, Jennings, is in 14th place and 10 seconds behind. That is a huge gap for only lap 8 of this race.
Yeah, that is a pretty significant margin that Matt Hoyland has. There's Chris Jennings in the Axis SimSport 122 Porsche. He is running P2 in Premier, but as it stands at the moment, he is well farther back overall. This is a pretty good result from Hoyland, and it'll help him out a whole lot in that championship fight, considering the one driver that was in front of him heading into this race is Nick Stube, and he ran into some issues earlier on. I don't even know where Nick Stube is running as it stands at this point. He is well farther back, unless I'm very much mistaken, has not had a good start to the race for sure. Looking at this at the front, though, looks like Dena Brega dealing with some lap traffic already, still building that gap to himself and his teammate to now over 1 second. But lap traffic playing a role in these 30-minute long races. Don't usually see this, Aaron.
No, you do not, as that looks like a mini incident there. I think they were all okay, though. That's De Vries currently getting past those two drivers there of Van der Meer and Martin Koch as well, as De Vries is one of the only drivers in the entire series to be using the Audi. I literally the only driver currently in the lobby to be using the Audi, and well, I pray for him, as obviously in your head you're like, oh, it's basically the same as the Lamborghini, but I guess you could say that they handle quite differently from one another. Same engine, of course, but apparently the Audi not handling as well as the Lamborghini, as Jean McLaughlin in the midst of a fight with these guys heading up to turn 6, getting very close there as he's trying to get past Malcolm Post, I believe, as no, he's defending from Peter Black and doing very well at it. He's got a huge train of cars behind him, and when I say huge, I do mean huge. That's about 6 or 7 cars that he's holding off, but holding them off well so far. That Porsche looking quite handy today, but you would say that the McLaren just looks a touch faster around this track at the moment.
In the midst of that is Rob McKee running P2 in the Evo category. Gotta say, Ashley Brooks off to a flyer in the Evo class, 10.5 seconds in front of Rob McKee, albeit McKee is in the midst of a hornet's nest of GT3 race cars. Jean McLaughlin, you can see him cutting down to that inside line coming out of turn number 14. The draft is oh so important around a racetrack like this, because from the exit of turn 12 of Zhongsao all the way up into the braking zone of the Senna S into turn number 1, you are flat out entirely, and you're even bending the floor pan in your race car if you want to try and hold on to that spot. Some drivers are trying to get as good of an exit as they can onto that flat out blast, but getting caught out a little bit was Rob McKee. As you can see, Robin Aston in the King GP2 McLaren, the 125 car, trying to get a move done on McKee to move up another spot overall. Aston currently running P9 in the Premier category, McKee running 2nd in Evo. Both of those drivers running 24th and 25th respectively overall, but looking like a fight brewing between those two drivers, actually with them losing touch of the two cars in front.
Yeah, they were just losing just a tad in front, as Joe Glass now trying to pip a move on, that's John Ludbrook, who he's just about managed to get past. And now looking towards Van der Meer in front of him, and not too difficult there, as turn 6 seems to be actually quite a popular move for a lot of people right now, and I think it's just punishing some of those guys who are going wide at turn 4, as this is Matthew Jones currently discarding his rear bumper, as he's definitely had a bit of a whack there, either from someone or possibly hitting something. Let's find out what happened to Matthew Jones. And gets it. Oh, that's a big old whack from the Mercedes there, and that'll explain why he no longer has the rear of his car.
And on a somewhat related note, Aaron, I just found this on eBay. There's a bumper for a McLaren 720S GT3 race car found in, it's marked as used condition on eBay right now, currently being sold out of Sao Paulo, Brazil. But looking at that, that was a big amount of drama hanging off into turn number 4. Kind of the action that you come to expect at a racetrack like this. Even though you've got that runoff area, You don't want to have to use that at all. You can occasionally have moments like that happen. Despite the fact that this racetrack has as much runoff area as it does, there's certain parts of this racetrack, Aaron, which to me at least kind of feels street circuit-esque. It's a very old school circuit, even though it's up to grade 1 certification. Was built all the way back in the 60s, I believe, with many of the parts of the track that we're racing on today being used all the way back in the day. So I don't know, maybe my perspective's just a little bit off, but parts of this racetrack, at least to me, still have that like odd street circuit feel, despite the fact that this racetrack was never a street circuit to begin with.
Yeah, I can definitely tell what you mean. I think mainly... Oh, that's a car going a bit wide. I say a bit wide, completely wide. At the basically final corner of turn 12, that's Brett Bearings, who's probably looped it coming out of turn 12, or indeed gotten a hit from behind from someone, as that's a mistake that you do often see here at Junção, but not really something I'd expect in a GT3 car. Let's take a look. Did he get it? Oh, it was just the car checking up in front, and that's unfortunate. That's lap traffic apparently from what I'm hearing, and well, that just makes it even more awkward, slowing up there on the corner entry, and I think it definitely is lap traffic. Oh, yeah, absolutely nothing Brett Bearings can do there, and you got to feel for the guy.
And that, I believe, may have possibly been the 68 of Sean Clark, that or the 66 of James Bostock. Either way, a little bit of drama involving that Porsche heading off into turn number 12. That's one of those sections, again, Aaron, where it feels like you have really no room to go at all. There's Sean Clark, so was a driver of the number 68 DXT Emerald entry. He's had a pretty rough go of things, already one lap down. The only other drivers that are either one lap down or multiple laps down is Kelso, who should report is out of the race after suffering some connection issues. He withdrew from the race himself to try and avoid any sort of drama, and Weir, running at the back of Evo, did not actually take the start of this race, so kind of that's a small little bow being tied around that. Looking at a fight though between Luke Lucchesi and Odin's Dena Brega, pulling away from these two as they start to fight.
Yeah, Dena Brega is just having the time of his life at the moment, and something I don't quite understand, just looking at all of their lap times, is just how much slower Lucchesi is than Dena Brega. Considering how close they've been this entire season, considering how close they were in qualifying, Dena Brega is knocking Lucchesi out of the park right now. On their last lap, he was 0.3 of a second quicker than him, and his fastest lap, as you can see, is 0.4 of a second quicker than Lucchesi. And it's just shocking just how much Lucchesi is struggling, as even some of the drivers behind Lucchesi look a bit quicker than him. Otins and Lee definitely look at least a 10th or 2 quicker. I don't know what's going on for Lucchesi. Maybe the Porsche is just struggling in these racier conditions or whatnot. He seems to be losing out in a straight line ever so slightly, but that could also be helped by the slipstream of the cars behind. But yeah, he just doesn't seem to have it in this race at least. And well, we'll keep an eye on that gap as it probably will extend over the next few laps, as this is Stephen Donnelly really in the midst of it at the moment, all over the place heading through Junção, as Van Ziest in the car ahead trying to get the slipstream. Brayton back as well in this train as well. Malcolm Coates not too far behind. A big 4-car train here as we tumble into turn 1. I don't think anyone's quite close enough to go for a move, but Brayton back thinking about it. Then Stephen Donnelly thinking about it. Had to go a bit defensive into there, but just about made the corner. And I have the feeling this battle's going to heat up, and that's a car going for it in the background. That's a Porsche and Peter back in the Ferrari, and that's John McLaughlin as well. They were battling for the last few laps we saw, and that looked like it was contact with both of them coming out of the center S's, as they're already making contact as we head into turn 1. Is it going to be Peter Black putting his nose up into this corner, and they just make contact, and John McLaughlin nearly kept it, but just a slight switch and a huge hit into the wall.
Yeah, that was a big side hit into that Ormco on the outskirts at turn number 3. Gotta take a look at that from Peter Black's perspective. It's very difficult to see out of these cars at times, and when you're in the midst of battle, even if you aren't in a Ferrari, you will start to see that red mist. But look at another angle of this time from Jean McLuhan. Goes off the circuit.
Oh, that's a complete overreaction.
Yeah, I honestly, part of me thinks that the wheel may have been snapped out of his hands, because that was a lot of unnecessary pawing at the wheel. I would certainly not rule out that wheel being yanked out of his hands. Considering that was basically wheel-to-wheel contact with them hanging down into turn number 2, certainly won't rule it out. I don't have experience with a direct drive wheel myself, so I can't entirely say with 100% confidence that that could be the reason why. Aaron, I think you do have some experience with direct drive. You're a lot more of an accomplished sim racer than I am.
Well, it didn't look like a hard enough hit for him to... I mean, unless he has his force feedback cranked up to 1,000,000, but I mean, maybe he does, and that just completely overreacted, and maybe it quickly snapped on him, or maybe it was just a complete overreaction from Jean McLaughlin. And we can take another look at it, as this was just a slight tap, and yeah, I don't know. To me, that looks like he just panicked, honestly. I don't think the wheel snapped out of his hands. I think he just completely panicked there, and well, it's happened to some of us. It definitely has happened to me at the best of times, but definitely a newbie mistake there, as that's Alex Fretwell trying to open up a gap in front of him. Couldn't quite do it. This is Ashley Brooks who's currently in front of him, as Brooks is currently leading the Evo class. Fretwell is in second in the Premier class, and 14 seconds behind Hoyland, who is just having a stormer of a race so far. And this is for 13th overall, so just about missing out on that top 12 spot, as Ashley Brooks is currently 8 seconds behind 12th. So this is just going to be for just bragging rights at this point, as Alex Fretwell choosing to go up the inside. This is going to be awfully close. We know how good Ashley Brooks is at defending positions, and he's done it again. Holds on to that 13th spot, doesn't necessarily need to, but is choosing to nonetheless, as Ashley Brooks does what he does best, as Nick Stube looking up the inside of one of the Porsches there, and that's Ryan Woosley, who he's trying to go on the attack, and this is for position in the Premier class. This is for 11th place at the moment. Looks like Nick Stube could possibly get the move done into turn 4. Looking up the inside, was just not brave enough on the brakes there, maybe a little bit too far back as well. And he'll just have to stick in 12th for now. And I think the gaps up at the top are just starting to settle down, as Dennebrega hasn't really pulled away from Lucchesi on this lap, as James Horworth gets past one of the Lamborghinis, or is defending, as he defends from Gareth Newton in the Lamborghini there. That's for 6th place in the Evo class, and it's obviously a long way off Ashley Brooks. It kind of feels like Hoyland and Brooks kind of need to be in a different class at the moment, as they are putting on a very impressive performance in their respective classes.
And this is a really important performance as well for Matt Hoyland, because he entered this race second in the championship, 2 points behind Nick Stube. Stube, meanwhile, he's down in 12th in the Premier category as it stands at the moment, with about 4.5 minutes to go in this first of two 30-minute races that we have this evening. But Hoyland just being able to try and stake his claim on that Premier class championship lead. The Premier class has been oh so hard to try and keep tabs on thus far this season, Aaron. It's been very hard to keep tabs on. Speaking of keeping hard to keep tabs on, keeping it hard to keep off the road. That was not the right saying at all. Ashley Brooks making contact with Alex Fretwell a couple of moments ago. The driver running P2 in Premier at the moment, coming to blows with the driver leading in the Evo category. That was near disaster with the two of those cars heading down into Interlagos. That was near disaster for sure. They're very lucky that they got away with it. However, they've got a whole lot of pressure from some newcomers behind.
Yeah, if they keep fighting like this, it's just going to bring more and more people into this. It's Chris Jennings currently behind Ashley Brooks in that Porsche, and then not too far behind is Ruben Behrings who we know is on a current charge potentially. Probably not going to get that 12th spot in the overall, like I was talking about earlier on. Excuse me. And it's just too far gone now. It's way up the road. It's about 10 seconds for him. And, well, unless he can break some lap records in the next 2 laps, I don't think that's quite going to happen. But he can at least make his life less difficult, as he's got a couple places he can snatch up in the last few remaining laps that we have here at Interlagos in this first heat race. And not too long to go now. And, well, I was going to say who's going to win in each of our classes. Well, the Evo and the Premier are kind of dead set. But nevertheless, Ashley Brooks is still choosing to fight with Alex Fretwell, as Fretwell got a bit of contact there. Ashley Brooks tried to get the cutback, but just couldn't get any gap there, as Fretwell kind of parked it on the apex of turn 4. And they're going to go side by side again into turn 6, but Fretwell just backs out of it. Sorry, actually Brooks just backs out of it, and it's quite entertaining to see him carry on fighting. But he is just ever so slightly losing ground on some of the cars behind him. Needs to be careful, as this is Gareth and Newton, I believe, trying to get past some lapped traffic there. That was one of the lapped cars, I believe. As Christian Jennings has got to be awfully careful. That's Ruben Bearings, who's basically just muscled his way past and up into 15th place he goes. Obviously no change in class position at all for him, but just more grid slots for the next race. And I think no, we're not going to be on the white flag. I think we'll have one more lap after this, as we just missed it by about 20 seconds or so. So this is going to be the penultimate lap for everyone. Only 2 more chances for everyone to gain their last few moves, potentially gain a couple more grid spots. And the battle we're watching at the moment, it won't matter for the invert that we're going to have in the second race, but it's just going to be for those final braking rides.
And it would certainly matter if any of these drivers have a big amount of drama between now and the checkered flag. Ashley Brooks, he's looking to try and turn things around after a tough go of things 1 week ago. He's had a great season thus far, looking to try and continue that here at Interlagos, and as it stands right now at the 7.5 second lead, unless he gets struck by a falling anvil, he'll be on track to grab his 4th victory, which would be mightily impressive for the driver of that McLaren. Looking at that fight, though, Bearings is starting to feel very racy with Brooks side by side coming out of turn number 6 and 7. This is a good overtaking opportunity if a driver makes a mistake, but not much else. But these drivers feeling racy. Actually, that was Rob McKee involved in that. My apologies. The driver of the 17 DXT Cyan car running P2 as it stands at the moment in Evo, as the dive from Bearings heading off into turn number 10. Is it successful, though? I don't believe it will be, with McKee on the inside line hanging off through turn number 11 into turn number 12. One of these drivers is going to have to concede, otherwise you're both going to have a terrible exit going onto the back flat out blast before the end of this lap. Neither of them backed out of it, though. They're still side by side, dragging each other like they have a parachute behind them. McKee and Bearings, looks like McKee's going to have that inside line and going to try and use the muscle in that McLaren to muscle in front of that Porsche on his outside line. Looks like they're going to single file out, heading off into turn number 1. Well, they were single file for a moment, but still side by side. Bearings, a Belgian driver for DDK by ES Academy. He is feeling racy, and look at this, Francois Bandet in the DXT Magenta 28 car. He's feeling racy too. He stands 3rd at the moment in the Evo, but he is battling as hard as he possibly can, and this is a fight for position, because if he can get by Bearings and McKee, that would slip him up into P2, and that'd be a very good result for the Frenchman. Looking a little bit farther at the front of the field, I believe Denabrega is very close to taking the checkered flag, possibly. I believe he will be doing it this time by, as we are on the white. There's Denabrega, Tristan Denabrega, the RDSA Esports 270 McLaren, has been dominant in this race. It has been a dominating performance, and this is a brilliant result for him, to be sure. Weaving down the start finish straight away, he wins it in the elite category, 2.5 seconds in front of his 2-time reigning champion teammate of Luke Lucchesi. That is a performance to stand at for Tristan Denabrega.
Well, that's a statement and a half, not only just for the rest of this racing that we've got, it's just a statement for the rest of this season. 2.5 seconds probably could have been more, might have been taking it a bit easy at some points, but we might have a bit of a drag race to the line. The slipstream isn't as powerful in this GT3 cars, but it might just be enough for Ashley Brooks. It's not going to, though, as Alex Fretwell just holds on to 13th place. And, well, they still finished 11 seconds away from 12th place. That's a big old gap for them. And just goes to show how hard they were fighting until the very end. As Ashley Brooks, of course, wins out in the Evo class. Matt Hoyland, just utterly brilliant from him. 18 seconds ahead of his nearest rival. That is a statement and a half from him. And maybe some more people should have been using the BMW today, as it looks like a very, very racy car, at least in the hands of Matt Hoyland.
And that is a pretty impressive result for Hoyland in more ways than one, because that's the first time thus far this season that we have had a driver score 2 victories in the Premier category, let alone back-to-back wins. Thus far, it's been pretty up and down, with Corey Price winning the race at Le Mans to kick the season off, Ryan Woolsey finishing first in the Premier category for race 1 at Indianapolis, Berk Behrings finished at the top step in Premier for race 2, and then Matt Hoyland won at Barcelona, and he grabs the victory here for the first race at Interlagos. That's a very good result for him. That's going to help him out a whole lot in the championship standings. Gonna quickly run through the results, I think, before we move into talking about what is set to be a very interesting race 2 with a top 12 invert, some points battles that we definitely need to keep our eyes on, and that fight between the two RDSA esports teammates definitely going to be our center of attention, especially towards the beginning of this race, with those two looking to carve their way through the field and not have a repeat of what happened last time at Indianapolis. Shishin Denabrega wins it. It's his 3rd victory on the season, 2nd in a row. So the driver of the 270 car with a standout performance here for race number 1 at Interlagos, gonna grab the victory and really put himself on the map when it comes to challenging his teammate Luke Lucchesi for the championship. Speaking of that man, he finishes in 2nd. Ryan Oden's going to complete an all-South African podium here. The driver of the 264 Alpha 1 esports car rounds out your overall podium. Daniel Lee, however he likes to be called, he finishes in 4th. Stefano Gattuso in the Ferrari finishes in P5. Dean Powell in 6th. Luke King in 7th. Matt Hoyland in P8. John Brainback in 9th. Darren Sharples rounding out your overall top 10. Hoyland with a fantastic result to grab that Premier victory. Then moving on and looking at the final drivers inside the top 12, and this will be our front row for this second race. Thomas Pugh and Tom Weston. Weston finishing in 12th, going to be starting the second race from the pole. The DDK by ES Academy 201 car going to be starting the second race from the pole position. And right behind is Alex Fretwell, who finishes 2nd in the Premiers. Ashley Brooks finishes in P14. Ruben Behrings going to round out your top 15. I think those are just about all the results that we'll take a look at from that. We can scroll through those a little bit just to see the drivers that finish a little bit farther in the back. Some drivers who've had some pretty up and down seasons thus far. Gotta go all the way back to Francois Brendette and Rob McKee, just barely inside the top 20 to go back from Ashley Brooks, who had a brilliant drive in that first race. And Aaron, don't have to worry about pit stops, but we do have to worry about that top 12 invert. This second race, I think, is going to be a pretty damn good one.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm inclined to agree with you there. I definitely think Denabrega just has it on the rest of the field. I think he will probably, if he can keep it together on that first lap and just claw his way through the field, I think he'll win this race, and probably by at least a second or two, as I really do think he has got the pace in his back pocket to do so. It does mean he will have to get past some pretty tricky drivers. I mean, we saw how quick some other drivers like Otins and Daniel Lee were, so he's got to get past those guys. Of course, has to get back past his teammate again, but I can imagine he'll do that relatively quickly, or just follow his teammate through as they all climb up to try to get a race win of the season. But it's difficult to say, to be fair, because you've got some other drivers who might want to have something to prove. I mean, who knows how well Matt Hoyland can do if he can gain some good positions as well. Some other drivers like Luke King, he looked quite strong in that top 12 as well. It could be a complete mystery who's going to win this next race, but it could also be a whitewash. It's It's going to go either way. It will either be super close until the last lap, or someone will get in the lead and just run away with it.
I honestly gotta say I'm with you there, Aaron. I mean, we kind of saw a little bit of that, kind of both ends of both ends of the spectrum, both sides of the coin, whichever sort of terminology you want to use. We saw that at race 2 in Indy with some drivers starting to run away, then running into some difficulties, and then the fight just being absolute, pure, unalienable pandemonium towards the end of that second race at Indy about 2 weeks ago. So I gotta say I'm with you there, Aaron. I think we're going to see a little bit of both of that. We're going to see some drivers begin to run away with it, some other drivers that are going to be forces to be reckoned with. I think the main class fight is definitely going to be in Elite, because you've got Luke Lucchesi and Tristan Dennebrega starting in P12 and P11 respectively, and we saw last time out when we had these two 30-minute long races at Indy, Dennebrega ran into some difficulties. Lucchesi, meanwhile, was able to cut his way through the field like a hot knife through butter, so I honestly think that the advantage may go to Luke Lucchesi entering the second race. What do you think, Aaron?
Wow, it's like I said before, it's just so difficult to predict this second race, as there's a lot more variables in that top 12 than we had in that first race. But whoever ends up winning it, I'm sure, is just gonna feel absolutely elated when they come across the line.
That they certainly will. Grabbing a victory in this series before the halfway mark is going to be a good result for sure. Whoever can find it, we'll just have to wait and see what these 30 minutes of racing action that we have to look forward to are going to look like. Speaking of, we'll take a look at what the starting grid is going to look like for this second race. Now, at the top 12 invert, Tom Weston in the 201 DDK by ES Academy car. He is going to be starting this from a pole position. Thomas Pugh going to join him on that front row. Darren Sharples starting this race in third. John Brainback going to join him on that second row. Starting this race in fifth, the highest of the premier drivers is going to be Matt Hoyland, looking to get another good result and maybe continue that win streak up to 3 thus far this season. He's going to be starting at P5 overall next to Luke King. Starting this race in 7th is going to be Dean Powell. Stefano Gattuso going to start in P8. Looking at the cars running at your top 10 is going to be Daniel Lee and Ryan Odens. Luke Lucchesi and Tristan Dennebrega going to make an all RDSA esports 6th row. Doing the quick math in my head, Alex Fretwell going to be starting in 13th. Ashley Brooks going to be the highest starting Evo driver, trying to go 2 for 2 and continue that streak of victories. Starting in 15th is going to be Ruben Baring. Starting in 16th is going to be Chris Jennings. And rounding out your top 20 is going to be Victor Van Ziest, Marcel Brainback, Stephen Donnelly, and Malcolm Coates.
To round out the rest of your grid, from Malcolm Coates, Robin Aston in 21st place, Brett Bearings in 22nd, Francois Brandon in 23rd, Rob McKee 24th, and 25th is going to be Bostock, 26th Stube, Collar in 27th, Woosley in 28th, De Vries in 29th, Provost in 30th, Hallworth 31st, Turf Kruer in 32nd place, Newson 33rd, Joe Glass in 34th, Keenan 35th, Robin Noel Brown in 36th, Ludbrook 37th, Martin Koch in 38th, James Pallow in 39th, Sean Clark in 40th, 41st is going to be Jean McClawn, 42nd is going to be Joe Sparrow, 43rd, Jeffrey Darman, 44th, Van der Meer, 45th, Peter Black, 46th, Matthew Jones, 47th, Corey Maxim, 48th, Liam Kelso, and 49th is Danny Weir to round out the 49 car grid.
I think some of the drivers a little bit farther towards the back may not be taking the green, but still over 40 cars about to tackle the second of 2 30-minute races that we have for you this evening here on Apex Racing TV. It's already been a fantastic night of racing action with a top 12 invert and some drivers looking to try and make some moves not only in this race, but in the championship as well. It is going to be a good show. My eyes are on that RDSA duo, especially at the very beginning of this race, because that can result in a whole lot of drama for them trying to fight for that elite championship. The field now underway. The green flag is out. The drivers are on their way. Looks like a pretty good start for the driver of the Porsche at the front. That's Tom Weston grabbing that invert pole. He's going to be leading it over Thomas Pugh in that McLaren, and P2 Darren Sharples going to round out your overall top 3 as it stands at the moment, and that's a spin heading through turn number 3. Some drivers going off. That looks like Ashley Brooks going off the circuit in dramatic fashion.
That's a
big pile up, huge crash heading through turn number 3 at the very beginning of this race. Ryan Odin's involved in that. Brecht Bearings, Rob McKee involved in that as well. Some drivers careening their way down the running order. A big amount of drama at the very beginning of this race. The first few corners oh so difficult to try and navigate in these GT3 race cars, and we just saw that get put on full display. It looked more like a NASCAR big one wreck than any wreck you'd see in a GT3 race.
Yeah, that's extremely unusual for one of these starts, as Malcolm Coates definitely having the most draggy Corvette in the world. He's completely missing the front of his car, and well, there is literally nothing in front of those front tyres, and I will not be surprised if we see him coming into the pits at the end of this lap. That was a huge incident for most of our drivers, and some big names as well. Like we said, Ashley Brooks, who had such a good first race, has gone all the way back down once again. And that was about, I think, around 8 or 10 cars. And it's, of course, put a massive spread on some of the field. And luckily, some of the other drivers, like Lucchesi, Dennebrega, they all survived perfectly fine. Ruben Bearings, like I said before, he could have made his day even better. And he has done. He's up to 7th place. He's had a dream start, has Ruben Bearings. Amazing for him. Matt Hoyland as well, up to 4th overall, and of course still leading the Premier class. Let's have a look at what happened then, as I didn't quite catch who was the first driver. That was Turf Crewer and one of the BMWs, and everyone else behind had to check up as we headed into the Center S's. And then, of course, what happened in front was just utter chaos. Whoever that is, the Mercedes coming out the pits, you smart man, you just gained about 10 places from that alone. And Turf Crew had just about managed to avoid all of the carnage coming out of turn 3. And I still do not know, like, what started this. It just kind of happened.
I think as we're going to take a look at some more drivers' perspectives of all that, I believe it all started, you can see that spin heading off into turn number 1. That was the first source of drama, and I think if it wasn't for that major bit of drama heading off into turn number 1 for some of the drivers a little bit farther in the back, this would have been an even bigger wreck that it was. Look at that from Jeffrey Damon, threading the needle. He may need a change of pants after that. That was terrifying for the race community.nl number 44 McLaren. That was absolutely terrifying. On the top 10 list of things that you don't want to see grace your eyes whenever you're in a GT3 race, I think that's up there on the list. The only things that are probably above it are probably a falling anvil and a falling asteroid. That was a near disaster for the drivers involved in that. It was an absolute disaster for them, but that could have been even worse. I believe what all started that, Aaron, was Jean Brainback having a spin. Looked like he was side by side. I forget who it was. I'm not entirely sure who it was, I should say. That he spun off the front bumper of, but it was one spinner and then just all hell broke loose. So Brainback, who I believe started this race in P4 or P5, was, at least from my small little recollection of it, I think the driver that set that incident off.
I think you might be right of that, as Ryan Otins was one of the drivers who I was talking about. I could have had a decent chance in this race, was involved in that incident and has to come into the pits, and obviously has lost a huge amount of time from doing so, and we probably won't see too much of him for the rest of this race. Meanwhile, further up the grid, this is Matt Hoyland, who still holds the 4th place spot, and he's just behind Stefan Gattuso, who's currently 3rd overall and 3rd in the elite class, and Matt Hoyland is kind of pressuring him along, kind of just, you know, getting him to give him the hurry up, and he does not want to be attacked by Powell, Lee, Bearings, and Lucchesi and Dennebrega. And honestly, Matt Hoyland could get a decent result today if he just picks his moments right, if he just keeps it together. We could see a Premier driver possibly in the top 5, and, well, at the moment, it could be even better for him, potentially 3rd at his best.
And he gained a whole lot as a result of the drama that happened at the very beginning of this race. Gonna try and find the replay of that chaos that went on at the very beginning. You can see that drama heading off through 1 and 2, some drivers spinning all around. Didn't even really see that considering all the drama that went on heading through turn number 3. Can't really blame us though, because in all of that chaos, Ashley Brooks has been taken out of this race. There you can see him in that green and white McLaren as Sean Clark in the DXT Emerald number 68 car arrived at the scene of the accident. So Brooks getting a big piece of that. That takes him out of contention for the EVO win. So, I mean, even though I said before the start of the race, Aaron, that I think the elite fight was going to be the one to keep our eyes on, it still very much is, with Pugh and Sharples running P1 and P2, separated by only 0.3 of a second, and you've got Dana Brega and Lucchesi still battling to get involved in that fight. That EVO fight, I think that's going to be another good one to keep our eyes on, with Brooks and pretty much all the other contenders that we've seen in that EVO category kind of being wiped out at the very beginning.
Yeah, it just opens it up ever so slightly for the rest of the grid as well. It opens it up for the elite class as well, as this is Thomas Pugh just battling it with Darren Sharples as we head into the first corner. Darren taking the lead of the race momentarily, but just got out of shape coming out of turn 3. And Thomas Pugh moves back into the lead. And these guys fighting is just bringing everyone else closer in every single lap. And this, I think they had a gap of about 2 seconds to Gattuso, and them both battling and losing a bit of time into those first few corners has allowed everyone else behind to catch back up, and it brings pretty much the top 7 or 8 cars in this race in the fight for the lead. And that does include Matt Hoyland, who's probably having an absolute whale of a time, as this is Dean Powell going past, I believe, Matt Hoyland into the first corner, into the fourth corner, my apologies, as Matt Hoyland has lost a few places on this lap, potentially just taking it ever so slightly easy and choosing not to fight the cars around him. But he can still gain a lot in this race, as he's 4 seconds ahead of Alex Fretwell. And, well, that's, I mean, he had a huge gap in the first race. It could happen again in today's race if he just keeps tabs with this front chasing pack.
Looking at Gareth Noon right now in the number 24 Lamborghini, running 7th at the moment in the EVO category, outside of the dominant driver thus far this season of Ashley Brooks. He's the only other driver to score a victory thus far this season in the EVO category. However, looks like that streak is definitely going to be broken with that EVO class being absolutely wide open. Noon running down at 7th, and Brooks running into the troubles at the very beginning of this race. It's definitely hard to try and pick out who may be our driver to keep our eyes out in that EVO class, because I think the top 3 at the moment are separated by about a half a second. Here's, you can see the damage on Ashley Brooks, number 19 McLaren. He was very slow, got involved in that incident. Tough for him as well. Started this second race in 13th overall and was on track for a very good result. You can see that drama, and Brooks kind of, oh, that was a big hit into the outside wall. Very lucky that it wasn't a double hit with the Armco and the tire barrier, but that impact nevertheless destroyed that McLaren, and so as a result, he has careened his way down the running order. The driver that started in 13th overall, not just in class, now running P11 in class, well farther behind overall.
And it looks like Matt Hoyland can count his lucky stars, as he just about avoided that incident, or maybe, as I suspected, he was the driver that yeah, he was technically the driver that started it all. And, well, you could technically say that Matt Hoyland is single-handedly responsible for about 8 counts of murder today, as that was a big impact between those two, and then that just started a chain reaction behind. So it'll be interesting to see what the stewards think of that one, as we're back up to the front of this battle between Sharples and Thomas Pugh, as they need to be careful. That was super, super close. But Thomas Pugh, I think, is just how to slam on the brakes there to avoid Darren Sharples. And now we've got 4 cars trying to fight for second place, as Daniel Lee just making his way past. I think Thomas Pugh is taking it very easy, perhaps intimidated a little bit by all the cars around him, as Gattuso now goes up into second place. Should be a slam dunk move for him. Thomas has got to watch out though. The outside line into this next few corners can put you a little bit off, but it looks like he's just about kept it on. A little bit shaky there through turn 7, as Dean Powell now has gotten past as well, or looking to get past, as that's a slide for Daniel Lee as he gets past Thomas Pugh. And now here goes Dean Powell up the inside. Honestly, Thomas is getting just... I was about to say something I definitely shouldn't say on Apex Racing TV, but he's just getting absolutely just from left, attacked left, right and centre. And he cannot take his eyes off his rear view mirrors as it's happening again. Ruben Bering's now trying to overtake Thomas Pugh. It's been an awful lap for the McLaren, as he's just losing more and more places. It could be about to get even worse for him, as Ruben Bearings looks to be just losing a touch on the straights, but surely under brakes will have him into the first corner. And look at that, that's Dennebrega trying to make a move on Lucchesi, and I think he's gotten it done. So that's Dennebrega ahead of his teammate, and now Dennebrega's trying to get past Thomas Pugh. Honestly, he's gone from first all the way down to, what, it's going to be 8th by the time we get to turn 4, as Lucchesi now tries to get past Thomas Pugh. But that was very opportunistic from Dennebrega to get past his teammate, and that's probably one of the most difficult moves that he needed to make in this race, and he's done it. Up into 6th, Thomas Pugh now could be down to 9th overall, as Matt Hoyland now goes round the outside. And I don't think I've ever seen anyone lose this many positions in one lap on pure pace alone. No mistakes, no nothing. Thomas Pugh is just getting attacked and abused from every single angle you look at. He's just about holding on to 8th place at the moment, as Matt Hoyland probably will have to save the overtaking for the main straight. And yes, Thomas Pugh can finally have just a corner to think about anything else than what's behind him, as now he can just focus on the task ahead. But wow, that was a very chaotic last lap and a half, as just everyone in the elite class just switching up places.
Yeah, that was disastrous for Thomas Pugh. You can call him wet laundry, because he was hung out to dry for a matter of about a lap and a half, just careening his way down the running order. And we saw that battle with the two RDSA esports teammates involved in the midst of that. That was pretty close, it must be said, between the two teammates. If you're a team manager for RDSA Esports, I can imagine you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable having your two main guys battling as hard as they are. Here's a hard battler, Bearings. Even though he's missing a front bumper, he is still wheeling that Porsche around this racetrack, trying to get a move done and doing so unsuccessfully. That was himself, and I believe Corey Maxim. Yes, you can see Maxim in that flat cap racing number 230 McLaren, the driver that had a major crash at the beginning of procedures here for round number 4 of the ESR GT3 championship. Went off the circuit, heading off coming out of turn number 11 into turn 12 of Jung Sao, and ever since then he's been on the back foot massively, but recovering quite nicely, if I do say so myself. Joe Glassgang trying to, oh boy, Joe Glassgang, a move put on him by Ryan Woolsey, as my tongue gets wrapped around itself 14 times, as Glass trying to look for a move on him. These drivers trading pain and trading blows heading through the corner. Gotta say, a whole lot of McLarens running in this race. Gotta say, Aaron, I'm not sure if you saw this like I saw it, but some of these drivers saying that McLaren just has those legs on that straightaway. So I think the McLaren, that could be the reason why, of the classes that we've got right now, most of the field is really made up of those new McLarens.
Shock, the newest car to iRacing is the quickest in a straight line. Wonder why that's happening. But anyway, potentially, apart from that very obvious reason, it could also potentially just be that maybe the McLaren's just a bit easier to set up. It could be easier through the corners, so you can run a little bit less downforce, as Luke King getting dive bombed left, right and centre from one of the McLarens, as that was, I believe, Joe Glass who managed to get past there. It was a very risky move, albeit he managed to do it. Overtook Luke King, who just seems to be suffering right now. He's just losing so much time on the straights. Unsurprisingly, I mean, he's got absolutely wow, it's probably the least slippery car in the world now without that front bumper. It's just creating a huge amount of drag, and he's losing so much time on the straights. And well, the problem with this is if you come into the pits is, oh, and he's lost it.
And getting caught up involved in that is the Porsche. That, I believe, was Noel Brown involved in that. Luke King going for a spin in one of the Porsches and getting hit by another one. So Luke King, the Alpha 1 Esports 243 car, careening down the running order. That is a dangerous spot to be parked at. At this point, I'm not even sure if it's worth it to try and rejoin the racetrack. He got some damage. That was some pretty significant contact for Luke King, but he eventually gets it turned back around. Having to be stopped there for such an extended period of time to avoid even more drama, but King having a moment, and that's careened him down the running order overall and in the elite category. Got to take a look at a replay to see what happened to the driver of the 243 Alpha 1 Esports Porsche. Hits that curb on the inside. And that was a pretty odd curb back, honestly, Aaron. Looking at that, hit that curb and just pop that car up into the air. I'm curious whether or not that damage that he has on that car could be part of the reason why he had such an odd curb back.
Well, potentially. I mean, he did take a very odd line through that corner, it must be said. And I think he might have just been a little bit unsettled by the handling of his car and the cars in front as well. And I'm not surprised we're seeing him come into the pits, and that's pretty much going to be the end of Luke King's race. Leaving it very late on the brakes, admittedly. I think he's just about made it okay without getting any kind of penalty. Of course, not that it's going to matter to Luke King's race too much. He's going to be, I think, a lap down after he comes back out onto the track, because this front group is getting very, very spicy indeed, as Gattuso managed to get into the lead at some point, as Sharples is now into second. Daniel Lee's in third. Dennebrager's up to fourth. I did say that Dennebrager definitely has a chance to win this one, and he's only a second off the lead, three places behind, and with 13 minutes to go. Well, can it be anyone in the top 8 that could win this one? Probably. As here we go then into turn 1. That's Daniel Lee. Got to be careful. Getting extremely close to Darren Sharples. Just could not find the gap at all to go in front, as Dean Powell now tries to see if he can squeeze into this one as well. Dennebrager following Sharples on through, giving him a bit of a bump draft, I think, as Dennebrager could see himself getting up. We're going 3 wide into turn 4. I think Dennebrager got left out to dry there, and that's really going to hurt his chances, as now we go 3 wide up to turn 6. Dennebrager has to back out of it. He can see this one's getting a little too hairy, as Bearings now making contact with Dean Powell going off the track, as well as Dennebrager just suffering there on the outside, and he's lost a few places. Pugh and Lucchesi, I think, were swapping places a couple places back. And wow, this front 8 group of cars has really opened up, as Gattuso in all that has just romped away, and he's about a second and a half ahead of Lee now. It's nearly 2 seconds, as Dean Powell still fighting it out with Dennebrager, as that's one of the McLarens as well further back, fighting it out with Lucchesi. And I think Lucchesi's had some kind of issue as well, as Thomas Pugh's managed to get back past. It's utter chaos for the front 9 places in this race. Matt Hoyland is just right behind these guys, just watching this, waiting for any easy pickings, as Dennebrager still trying to get past Dean Powell. And his contact! Dennebrager's been sent round, and so has Darren Sharples.
Dennebrager going around, another McLaren involved in that, and Dennebrager hit the wall. I think he's lost his rear bumper as a result of all of that. Disaster for the driver of McLaren. He is now going to lose out on a spot to his teammate, but Dennebrager, a costly mistake. Just a matter of 1 lap ago, he was battling for an overall podium spot. Now he's going to try and fight like hell to remain inside the top 10. Looking at this fight, though, it is pandemonium. We're riding on board with Thomas Pugh. I can barely keep track of this myself. You've got Pugh, Powell, Lucchesi involved in this as well. A near disaster heading down into turn number 8 or turn number 7, whatever corner it may be. This battling is oh so close. I don't even know where we are on the racetrack. It goes into turn number 8 where they nearly came to blows. Pew and Powell mistaking their GT3 race cars for some NASCAR stock cars, trying to do a bump and run off into turn number 8. I think if these drivers realize how much a front bumper costs in one of these race cars, they won't be using it as much as they have been. But in all of that chaos, it's actually broken up the lead battle in Elite. It was, what, about the top 8 covered by about 2 seconds not terribly long ago? Now Daniel Lee running P2 is nearly only 2 seconds back of Gattuso. I say only 2 seconds back. It was about 1.7 between the top 5. Now it's about 1.7 between the top 2. So in all of that chaos, it has broken up that fight a lot. Stefano Gattuso, I think he's very lucky and very happy about how things have gone as of late. He had nothing to do with the madness that went on behind him. And I gotta say, one car that is very much behind him, and not even a camera shot, I believe, going onto the back straightaway, is Tristan Denna Brega. He has lost out on a whole lot of time. The driver of the 270 RDSA Esports car,
he's
you
got
can see
huge
that
damage.
car was ill handling. Yeah, it may not have been just a rear bumper. I think he has some pretty significant suspension damage there. Did he tow back to the pits? Is he in pit lane at the moment? Yeah, I think he did. So Tristan Denna Brega having a big, costly moment. Was it contact? Yes, it was.
Oh, dear. I've seen that time and time again here in Interlagos. It's a fairly common place to have an incident. We saw it with, I think, Max and Hamilton not too long ago. I think that was in 2022 when that happened. It's just so simple. The outside car feels like it's got more room than it actually does. Tries to cut back across, and Dean Powell obviously having nowhere to go. I didn't really see what happened to Darren Sharples as well. Completely forgot about him. He also had a bit of an off into that first corner as well. And we can take a look. I don't know if he got caught up in that or had his own separate incident. I think it was just by himself. Yeah, it was. Just completely all by his lonesome. And he lost a few places as well. He was in 3rd, I believe. So he's lost out hugely. So, wow. Yeah, that really hotted up very, very quickly. Also what's hotted up is the battle in the Premier and the Evo classes, both for race wins. As Hoyland now under pressure from Alex Fretwell. As maybe Matt Hoyland's taking it a bit easy on the elite drivers, letting them all past, is maybe going to come back to haunt him now. As he's got his closest rival right behind him, and Bostock is very, very close to Brandon. I mean, when I say close, I'm pretty sure they're going side by side, as Bostock now has moved into the lead of the Evo class, but has to back out of it, as Brandon just about holding on to the lead of the Evo class. And you were saying, Ron, that this is going to heat up. We've got the top 3 separated by half a second in this class. And, well, the Evo class we've not really seen much of this season. Because Ashley Brooks has just been too damn good. Without him, look at it. We've got very, very close battling going on for some crucial points to try and gain on Ashley Brooks, as of course he had a poor round at Catalonia and has had a good one to begin with here, but will score very lowly for this second race. And it just opens up that championship a little bit more. And of course, mentioning the championship, can imagine how it's going to affect the elite championship, as Denna Brega is pretty much out of this race. And here is what happened between these guys. Bostock momentarily took the lead, but this outside line into turn 4 is really, really tricky. And seeing it in sim racing and in real life, you really do require the cooperation of both drivers going into there. But James Bostock now going for the lead again as we go into turn 1. It looks like Brandon is being very aggressive. That was, yeah, wheel-to-wheel contact. Door-to-door, trading paints there. Not sponsored by Trading Paints, I promise you. But Brandon just giving him a nudge on the inside there of turns 1 and 2. And just saying, I will not let you pass whatsoever. As, oh, that's contact there. That's one of the McLarens. That was Maxim, yeah, well spotted. And I don't really know what Maxim was doing there. He kind of just went into the back of, I think it was McKee in front, and, well, just looped it. He's lost about 5 seconds because of it.
Yeah, I was just going to note the fact that Corey Maximum was playing spoilers in this fight, playing the maximum spoiler that he possibly could, and there you can see him running into the back. I'm not sure if that was McKee. I believe he was on the inside of McKee at that point in time. That may have been James Bostock that he made contact with, the driver of the number 66 car, but either way, costly mistake for Maxim. He was running a little bit farther down in the class, and another mistake for him, capping off a pretty rough go of things for the American driver. Looking at this fight in Elite, though, it is still hot. Thomas Pugh looking to be on the comeback tour after that major bit of just getting hung out to dry earlier on. He had a horrid couple of laps there, but he's trying to be on the comeback tour. Is close to the back of Powell. They may be side by side in the not too distant future with only a couple of tenths of a second between those two cars. May see a move from Thomas Pugh, won't see a move from Thomas Pugh heading down the back straightaway off into turn number 4. That's a battle for P5 and P6 in the Elite category. Lucchesi, meanwhile, running, I would say, effectively all by himself. You can see him a little bit farther up in front there in that camera shot as we were following that fight, running P6, actually P5, P4, I believe it is P4 in the Elite category as it stands at the moment. So Lucchesi looking to try and gain big after a P2 result in race 2 and a P4 result in a P2 result in race 1 and a P4 result in race 2. So that'll be a pretty big points haul for him, especially with the trouble that Dena Brega is running into. But look at Odin trying to get move done around the outside of McLoone heading into turn number 6 and 7 and 8. That was some pretty intense stuff from Ryan Odins, but that move is still not done yet, as you're going to be side by side heading down into turn number 10. McLoone on that inside line. Odins on the outside in that Ferrari. They're still trading pain and trading blows all through the final sector of this lap into turn number 12. Are they single filing out? I don't believe they will, but Odins finally going to be able to get that move done to slip his way up into 9th.
I just have to be a bit patient for that one, as Oaten's, of course, having a very, very difficult one in the first race, but at least in this one, he's going fairly well. And, well, of course, that big incident at the start of the race, we thought he was down and out of it, but he's made some good progress so far, up to 19th, and could gain a few more places in this race. And well, we've only got 3 minutes to go in this race. It's absolutely flown by, and Gattuso has well, got a pretty easy time of it up at the front. He's got a decent gap to Lee behind, about 1.5 seconds, and he's not really made any inroads on that gap, as this is how we got P1 earlier on, as we didn't get to see it as we were focusing on, I think, a few other battles, as that was Sharples in front, went up the inside, bit of contact between those two. Gattuso definitely getting his elbows out there and got himself into the lead of the race, and has stayed there ever since, and has put on a fantastic performance so far in this race. And well, with only about, well, he's just going to get another lap into this race with 2 laps to go. 1.5 seconds, then 4 seconds to Ruben Behrens, who, by the way, Ruben Behrens has had a stormer of a race, considering he was down and out in that first race, managed to get himself back up to, I think it was about 15th place in the end, and then 12 places in this race to get himself onto the podium. It's been a superb performance by him, and really hats off to Ruben Behrens, who of course is a race winner in this season. He won the 2nd race at Indy Road, and probably, considering the pace he's had, maybe could have won today's race had he started a little bit further up the field. Would have definitely loved to have seen that, as this is John McLaughlin looking at the back of Rob McKee. But as we know, Rob McKee is quite the defender, definitely, so it's going to be a bit difficult for Jean to try and get past. And I think the race is just starting to settle down as we head into the last lap and a half.
And this race has definitely settled into some sort of groove. Stefano Gattuso looking to become just the 4th driver this season to take the victory in the elite category. He would join some very elite company in the process. See what I did there with the likes of Luke Lucchesi, Tristan Dennebrega, and Ruben Behrings, who, as you pointed out, scored the victory in the 2nd race at Indianapolis. Gotta say, there's something that should be noted about Ruben Behrings doing in the 2nd races. With these race meetings that we have in the ESR GT3 Championship, that may be a factor that we have to decide when it comes to deciding a champion and deciding some of the other positions in that elite championship fight, because it looks like he could just turn up the wicks in these 2nd races. Look at some battles a little bit farther behind. Here's Victor Van Ziest in the MJK Sim Racing entry. The driver of the 126 car, he is teammates with a driver who I don't believe is actually racing today, that being Luke Van Gortel. I don't think I've seen him yet tonight, so Luke Van Gortel, he's been involved in that championship fight in the elite category, was P4 coming into this race, so not sure how exactly he was able to miss out on this race. Certainly going to miss out on a whole lot of points. Got to be a pretty good points day for Ruben Behrings, with a drama involving John Brainback and Luke Van Gortel not racing, along with Tristan Dennebrega running into those difficulties during this race, and big contact hang down into turn number 6, and that is going to spin Ryan Woolsey around, running P7 in the Premier class as it stands currently. Oh boy, I think it was contact with glass possibly heading off into turn 6. Not sure what in the world happened there. A little bit of a rough rejoin, it must be said, from Ryan Woolsey. Not sure who that checks up as a result of that. Trying to check to see a car number off that. Maybe one of the Evo drivers. And looking at Stefano Gattuso, the driver of the 239 ADX Racing Esports Ferrari. He is victorious from race number 2 here at Interlagos, winning in front of Daniel Lee, who's been mightily impressive in his brief tenure in the series thus far. He finishes in 2nd. Look at Matt Hoyland completing a fantastic drive and scoring his 3rd victory, not just in a row, but of this season. Certainly staking claim on that Premier Championship lead. But looking at this fight between Brandit, this is not a fight for class position, as that Ferrari right behind him is a Premier driver, but Francois Brandet going to win it in the Evo category over Bostock, about 0.8 of a second behind him, P2, and Rob McKeough has a pretty good result, I believe one of his best so far this season, to finish in 3rd in the Evo category. That Evo fight was absolute pandemonium. There's the beautiful Hawkston Brewery and Hawkston Beer scheme on Rob McKee's number 17 McLaren. But Aaron, we are expecting some drama at the end of that race, and whether it be our championship favorites in the Evo category crashing out at the very beginning, a huge NASCAR-esque pileup at the very start of this race, or the pandemonium in Elite, that race, I think, it definitely gave us some good action and then some.
It really did deliver. These second races always seem to just be absolute chaos, and well, today was absolutely no different. And shock, Interlagos, we got great racing in both races and went pretty much all the way nearly until the very last lap in some of the classes. And Gattuso, a very, very impressive race by him as the driver who I don't think has led a race so far this season. Got into it and didn't relinquish it at all, just completely ran away from the rest of the field. And well, Daniel Lee having to settle for 2nd place again, and hopefully that's not a running theme for Daniel Lee and he can eventually get a win this season, as he definitely deserves it for carrying that hunk of to 2nd place. I mean, the Mercedes should not be that high at all, but he's somehow managed to do it, as that's Ruben Behrings choosing to have an interesting time in the pit lane, as I think a couple other drivers just gave him a bump. But yeah, well, speaking of Ruben Behrings, what a comeback as well. Managed to finish on the podium. And Lucchesi as well, huge championship points gained for him, as Dennebrega will be kicking himself. And like I said at the start of today's broadcast, Lucchesi doesn't seem to be as quick as Dennebrega, but he's just more consistent. And Dennebrega's done that twice this season, and I think that's going to come back to bite him come the end.
Yeah, even though we're so early on into this season, short of the halfway mark, these small little points that these drivers can pick up in these races may be the decider come time for the end of this season. It's been a fantastically entertaining one thus far, and the action continued tonight here at Interlagos, and the action going to continue all around the clock here on Apex Racing TV. Gives you more reason to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss any of the action. Mainly here from the ESR GT3 Championship, because this season has been a whole lot of fun, whether it be these 2 30-minute formats that we have in this series like we had tonight, or those 1-hour ones like the one we're going to have at Montreal in just 1 week's time here on Apex Racing TV. The action is definitely coming in spades. We'll take a look at the results when everything is said and done from race number 2. It was a hard-fought show, that field invert always proving to add a little bit of a spice of chaos for sure. But I'll tell you what, I don't think myself, Aaron, or our producer Josh is complaining at all. Josh's graphics card, on the other hand, may be a completely different story. Stefano Gattuso wins it when everything is said and done. Daniel Lee going to finish right behind in second, less than a second between those two cars. And I gotta say, Aaron, you brought up a good point. Daniel Lee has been pretty fast ever since he entered this series just 1 week ago at Barcelona. He's been close to a victory thus far. I feel like it's going to happen at some point in the not too distant future, but another P2 result here at Interlagos. Ruben Behrings, who in the last time we had a second race in one of these races, ended up winning it. He continues that streak of finishing on the podiums in races named number 2, so he is going to finish in third when everything is said and done here at Interlagos. Luke Lucchesi with a fantastic points day, possibly going to snag the championship lead as a result of this. He finishes in P4 after a P2 result in race number 1. Dean Powell going to round out your overall top 5. Thomas Pugh finishes right behind in P6. Matt Hoyland finishes in 7th, taking both victories in both races in the premier category. Well done from the driver of the 1-2-3 car. Alex Fretwell going to finish in 2nd. Nick Stube going to round out your podium in 3rd. A good result from Stube after a really frustrating race number 1. Victor Van Ziest going to round out your overall top 10. And looking right behind Stephen Donnelly, the Irishman finishes in 11th. Joe Glass finishes in 12th. Darren Sharples, who we saw briefly leading this race, finishes in P13. Tom Weston, who was leading this race and led the field to green, finishes down in 14th. Francois Brendette wins in the Evo category, finishing P15 overall. Ryan Odens, a South African, in that 264 Ferrari, gonna finish in 16th overall. James Bostock in 17th. Rob McKee in P18, Jean McClune in P19, Matthew Jones going to round out your overall top 20, the driver of the 158 car in the premier category. And looking at the rest of the top 25, we have Robin Noel Brown, Jonathan Provost, Ryan Woolsey, Jeffrey Damon, and Bert Behrings.
Oh, not too many drivers to go, hopefully. Corey Maxim in 26th place. And then Chris Keenan 27th, Newton in 28th, Horwath in 29th, Van der Meer in 30th place, Martin Koch in 31st, Sean Clark in 32nd, Malcolm Coates in 33rd, Luke King in 34th, Roald Turf Kruer in 35th, Jenna Brager, oh dearie me, down in 36th place. He will not be a happy man after today, I can assure you, after the pace he had. Yeah, he's going to be dearly, dearly frustrated with himself. Brayson back in 37th, Chris Jennings in 38th, other Brayson back in 39th, Ashley Brooks in 40th place. Another disappointing day for him, unfortunately. He's still obviously going to be in contention, but just not what he wanted in the end. Joe Sparrow in 41st, Dennis Kohler in 42nd, Peter Black 43rd. In 44th, we have De Vries, 45th, Robin Aston, John Ludbrook in 46th, James Pallow in 47th, and then Liam Kelso 48th, and Danny Weir in 49th and last place. And 49 cars, only had a few retirees, only about 6 or 7 of them, which is pretty good going considering the utter mayhem that we had it in both races, especially that second race. My God, I've not seen anything like that in a GT3 field in a long, long time. But it doesn't look like we have any interviews. Frustratingly, I don't think anyone is too much in the mood to talk, to be fair. It was a very mixed bag day for a lot of our drivers. So I'm not surprised that some of our usual candidates are not willing to have a chat.
Yeah, can't necessarily blame some of these drivers, even for a driver like Tristan Dennebrega, who experienced absolute elation with a brilliant drive in race 1, has a pretty bad one in race 2, and considering we are running a little bit close to the time constraints that we have tonight on Apex Racing TV, I think we're probably going to wrap things up and look forward to the next race of the season at Montreal, going to go back to that 1-hour format. And Aaron, as much as we saw a lot of drama here at Interlagos tonight, running at a track like that with really no runoff area at all, and a much older scan of Circuit Gilles Villeneuve as well, that I think is going to probably have the chaos we've seen thus far this season cranked up to about 45, even with the drama that we had at Barcelona in the rain 1 week ago. That's probably going to be the most hectic race we've had thus far.
I can't really imagine in my head Montreal and GT3 cars. It just does not seem like a combination that I think would end very well in, but of course there's only one way to find out, and that's of course by joining us same time next Thursday. And my god, if we have some difficult weather conditions there, oh, that should throw some spicy things into the mix. Montreal usually does like to, you know, have a bit of random weather here and there. People who have, you know, watch F1 will know exactly what I'm talking about. Let's hope we don't get conditions as bad as 2011, because then we'll be here for hours and hours on end waiting for the race to start. But either way, it should be some good fun. Difficult place to overtake, as I'm sure we all know, especially in these big hunky GT3s. But I think in terms of strategy, it should be a good one.
And that'll be the race that rounds off the first half of this season, which has been brilliantly entertaining thus far. The races that we had here at Interlagos tonight were entertaining as well, and that gives you more reason to hit that subscribe button and the notification bell so you never miss the action here on Apex Racing TV. But I think for tonight's broadcast, that will just about do it here from the Evolution Sim Racing GT3 Championship at Interlagos. And so, for myself, Ron Mons, Aaron Smith joining me in the commentary booth, and Josh Wilkie doing a brilliant job working all the cameras inside of the virtual production hauler, I say thank you all so very much for watching. Have a great rest of your night, and we hope to see you all wherever it is in the not too distant future.
Are you struggling for consistency in your sim racing? Does your iRating look like a roller coaster? If so, we have good news for you. The way to get more consistent is to first understand what you're doing differently than the professionals. And VRS is the answer. With our competitive subscription, you will have the telemetry, setups, tutorials, and everything else you need to fully analyze your driving. Our data packs and the ability to compare your driving with the best in the world will show you exactly where to adjust your inputs, change your driving line, and shave seconds off of your lap times. And our powerful and precise Direct Force Pro wheelbase and precision pedals are being used by some of the world's best drivers. All these champions agree that VRS hardware is not just the best on the market, it's also priced well below the competition. So if you're looking to upgrade to direct drive and the best pedals in sim racing, VRS is your answer. If you want to get better, get faster, and make it happen sooner rather than later, you owe it to yourself to find out why so many people are switching to VRS. You'll be so glad that you did. Visit www.virtualracingschool.com and learn why the best use